Star Trek gave us heroes, legends, and unforgettable journeys through the stars. But behind the camera, real-life tragedy struck harder than any alien war. Some of the show's most beloved actors are no longer with us, and the way they left this world will surprise you. From shocking accidents to heartbreaking battles with illness, these stories go far beyond what we saw on screen. Today, we're honoring 8 unforgettable Star Trek stars who left us too soon, but whose legacies still shine across the galaxy. If any story moves you, hit like and tell us which actors stayed in your heart. Grace Lee Whitney played Yeoman Janice Rand, the poised, elegant assistant to Captain Kirk whose presence on the bridge of the Enterprise gave Star Trek one of its earliest and most enduring female icons. She was born Mary Ann Chase on April 1, 1930 in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and adopted into the Whitney family as a child. Life was never simple for Grace. Even as a teenager singing jazz in smoky clubs, she carried invisible wounds, abandonment, rejection, and a longing to be seen. By the time she was cast in Star Trek, she had already been in over 100 shows and films. Janice Rand was supposed to be her big break, but 8 episodes in, she was abruptly written out. There was no warning, no explanation, just silence, and behind that silence was pain. In her memoir, Grace later revealed something that had haunted her for decades. During her time on Star Trek, she had been sexually assaulted by a high-ranking studio executive. She never named him. She never pressed charges. But the damage was done. The betrayal broke something inside her, and alcohol became the only thing that made the silence bearable. For years, she disappeared from the spotlight. No one knew where Janice Rand had gone, but Grace wasn't done yet. With help from Leonard Nimoy and her own unshakable faith, she got sober. She became an advocate for recovery, speaking openly about the demons she had faced. And when she returned to Star Trek, in the films, in Voyager, in conventions filled with fans who never forgot her, there was a kind of quiet justice, a homecoming she had earned the hard way. Grace Lee Whitney passed away on May 1, 2015 at the age of 85. She died peacefully, but her journey was anything but. The woman who once vanished from the screen found her voice again, and in doing so, helped others rediscover their own. James Duhan played Montgomery Scotty Scott, the miracle-working chief engineer aboard the Enterprise who could fix anything with duct tape, coffee, and pure Scottish grit. His accent was thick, his temper short, but his loyalty unshakable. To millions of fans, he wasn't just the guy in the engine room, he was the heart that kept the Enterprise running. Born on March 3, 1920 in Vancouver, British Columbia, James grew up in a strict household with an alcoholic father. He escaped through science fiction and engineering, 2 passions that would later define his career. During World War II, he served with the Canadian Forces and landed on Juno Beach during D-Day. That day, he was shot 6 times. 1 bullet took off his middle finger, another nearly hit his heart. He survived by a hair and never spoke much about it. After the war, James studied acting and radio. He did hundreds of voices, dozens of TV roles. But it was Star Trek that gave him immortality. Scotty wasn't just comic relief, he was competence, confidence, and cool under pressure. And the accent? He made it up on the spot, believing the best engineers are Scots. Off-camera, Duhan was nothing like the gruff mechanic he played. He was warm, sharp-witted, and fiercely protective of fans. One fan wrote him a suicide letter. James called her, talked for hours, and stayed in touch for years. That girl went on to earn her engineering degree. Like Scotty, he saved lives in more ways than one, but behind the charm was pain. James struggled with alcohol for much of his life. Fame didn't fix that. Neither did 4 marriages. In his later years, he suffered from Parkinson's, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. The man who once ran starships now needed help walking across a room. James Duhan passed away on July 20, 2005 at age 85. He died from pneumonia and complications of Alzheimer's disease. His ashes were later sent into space, a fitting farewell for the man who spent decades bringing the stars closer to Earth. Majel Barrett Rodenberry played Nurse Christine Chapel in the original series and later became the flamboyant, sharp-tongued Lwaxana Troi in The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. But her most lasting role? The calm, steady voice of the Enterprise computer that fans heard across decades. Her presence was everywhere, sometimes loud and colorful, sometimes just a whisper in the background, always unmistakable. She was born Majel Lee Hudek on February 23, 1932 in Cleveland, Ohio. From a young age, she chased performance, acting on stage, doing bit parts on TV, never quite fitting into the mold. In 1964, she landed a bold role, the first officer number 1 in Star Trek's original pilot, The Cage. But executives balked at the idea of a woman in command. She was quietly written out. Most actors would have walked away. Majel didn't. She came back as Christine Chapel, then again as the voice of the ship's computer, again as Lwaxana Troi, always returning, always finding her place, one role at a time. Around that time, she met Gene Roddenberry. Their love wasn't simple. He was still married, she was younger, and whispers filled Hollywood. But Majel stayed. Through scandal, silence, and criticism, she stayed. They married in 1969, and when Gene passed away in 1991, people feared that Star Trek's heart might die with him. But Majel stepped forward. She picked up his unfinished scripts, his wild sketches, and turned them into new shows: Earth, Final Conflict, Andromeda. She moved into the producer's chair, battled studio politics, and fought for Gene's vision when no one else would. She wasn't just the first lady of Star Trek, she was the keeper of its soul. The years took their toll. As age and illness crept in, she kept working, kept recording that gentle, iconic voice fans had come to associate with safety and control, until finally in 2008, leukemia forced her to rest. Majel Barrett Rodenberry passed away on December 18, 2008 at age 76. But not before recording her final performance, the voice of the ship's computer in the 2009 Star Trek reboot. One last echo reaching through space and time. DeForest Kelly played Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, the irritable, big-hearted chief medical officer who grumbled his way into everyone's heart. He was the voice of compassion aboard the Enterprise, always quick with a sharp retort or a gentle truth. "I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer." It wasn't just a line, it was who he was, grounded, honest, human. Born on January 20, 1920 in Atlanta, Georgia, DeForest came from a quiet, spiritual upbringing. He sang solos in church, dreamed of medicine, and wore kindness like a second skin. But life nudged him toward Hollywood, and he listened. For years, he played outlaws and bad men in westerns, until Star Trek gave him the chance to show something deeper, a gruff soul with gold underneath. As Dr. McCoy, Kelly became the emotional anchor of Star Trek. Where Spock was logic and Kirk was instinct, Bones was conscience. He didn't save the galaxy with phasers, he saved it with empathy, and fans loved him for it. Off-camera, DeForest was just as gentle. He married Carolyn in 1945, and they stayed together for over 5 decades. No scandals, no spotlight chasing, just loyalty, quiet grace. He wrote poetry, answered fan letters by hand, and never stopped thanking people for the love they gave him. In the late 90s, he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. True to form, he didn't make a fuss. He faded quietly, just like he lived, dignified, humble, kind. On June 11, 1999, DeForest Kelly passed away at the age of 79 in a small hospital in Los Angeles. No drama, no press, just peace. The day he left, it felt like the warmth went out of the room, not loudly, just gone. And those who felt it knew, Bones wasn't just part of the crew, he was the soul that held it all together. Leonard Nimoy played Mr. Spock, the half-human, half-Vulcan science officer whose calm logic and quiet presence became the soul of Star Trek. With one raised eyebrow and a perfectly timed pause, he turned what could have been a stiff alien into one of television's most human characters. Nimoy was born on March 26, 1931, in Boston, Massachusetts, to Ukrainian Jewish immigrants. He grew up in a cramped apartment in the city's West End, far from the stars he would one day command. From the beginning, he was drawn to performance, not for fame, but for connection, for meaning. When Star Trek launched in 1966, no one imagined it would become a phenomenon. But Spock struck a nerve. He was the outsider, the quiet one, the thinker who never quite fit in, until fans made him theirs. Nimoy gave that role everything: depth, restraint, dignity, and it changed his life forever. Off-screen, Leonard wrestled with what that meant. His first memoir was titled I Am Not Spock. Years later, his second was I Am Spock. That arc said it all. He had fought the shadow of his own creation and finally made peace with it. Nimoy wasn't just an actor. He directed, photographed, wrote poetry, and made experimental music. He found art in the unexpected. He also found pain. Years of smoking caught up with him in his 70s. COPD robbed him of breath, of energy, of freedom. Still, he used his voice while he had it, warning others, tweeting, advocating, staying visible. Even as the disease closed in, he didn't retreat. He reached out. On February 27, 2015, Leonard Nimoy passed away at the age of 83. His final tweet read, "A life is like a garden. Perfect moments can be had but not preserved, except in memory." LLAP. And just like that, the man who gave voice to pure logic reminded us, one last time, of the fragile beauty of being human. Anton Yelchin played Pavel Chekhov, the brilliant young ensign with the thick Russian accent and nervous energy that somehow made the whole bridge feel brighter. In the Star Trek reboot, he wasn't just comic relief. He was youthful hope, raw intelligence, and that rare spark that made everyone smile just a little wider when he walked into the scene. Anton was born on March 11, 1989 in Leningrad, Soviet Union, and came to America as an infant with his parents, both Olympic-level figure skaters who left everything behind to give their son a future. It didn't take long to see that Anton had something rare, not just talent, sensitivity, insight, a gentleness that glowed through the screen. He was barely a teenager when Hollywood started noticing. Hearts in Atlantis, Alpha Dog, Terminator Salvation. He moved between indie gems and blockbusters with a quiet, humble brilliance. Off-screen, he was just as layered, obsessed with photography, jazz, literature. He played guitar like an old soul trapped in a young body. He wrote poems he never showed anyone. And behind it all, he carried a secret, a lifelong illness, cystic fibrosis, that he never used as an excuse. Then came that morning, June 19, 2016. Anton didn't show up for rehearsal. Friends got worried. They drove to his home and found him in the driveway, pinned between his Jeep and a brick mailbox pillar. The car had rolled backwards, trapping him silently. He was gone before anyone knew he was in danger. He was 27. And just like that, a light went out. Not with a scream, but with a stunned silence that no one knew how to fill. His parents, shattered, made a documentary called Love Antosha to share the son the world barely got to know. And those who watched it saw not a rising star, but a beautiful soul who was already shining. He didn't get decades. He didn't get a farewell. But in the years he had, Anton Yelchin gave us something we can never lose, proof that even the shortest lives can echo the loudest. Nichols played Lieutenant Nyota Uhura, the calm, commanding voice on the bridge of the Enterprise, and the first time so many little girls saw themselves in the future. With her earpiece, her quiet strength, and her unwavering presence, she wasn't just a communications officer. She was the signal, the message, that tomorrow could belong to everyone. Born on December 28, 1932 in Robbins, Illinois, Nichelle grew up in a world that told her what she couldn't do. She didn't listen. By her teens, she was already dancing with Duke Ellington, singing in jazz clubs, and stealing breaths in every room she entered. When she joined Star Trek in 1966, the world changed a little. Here was a black woman, not in the background, not a maid, not a punchline, but an officer, a leader. Someone Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself begged her to keep playing, saying, "You don't understand the power of your role." And he was right. But the truth, that power came with a price. Nichelle often felt invisible behind the scenes, lines cut, screen time lost, opportunities passed over. While fans saw a trailblazer, she sometimes felt like a shadow in her own story. But she stayed. She endured. And later, she used that platform not just to act, but to recruit the next generation of real-life space explorers with NASA, because if she could open a door, she wasn't going to close it behind her. In her final years, the woman who helped us imagine a future of unity quietly slipped into confusion. Dementia crept in, legal battles drained her peace, and the once radiant voice of the galaxy grew faint. On July 30th, 2022, Nichelle Nichols passed away at 89. She had lived long, she had influenced deeply, but behind the legacy was also a woman, tired, brilliant, and sometimes heartbreakingly alone. She taught us to look to the stars, and in the silence she left behind, you can still hear her saying, "We belong there too." Merritt Butchri played Dr. David Marcus, the passionate, idealistic son of Captain James T. Kirk, in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. His character brought a quiet ache to the saga, a reminder that even in space, family is messy, complicated, and sometimes heartbreaking. Merritt was born on September 3, 1959 in Gainesville, Florida, and raised in California. He never finished drama school, but it didn't matter. His raw energy, his vulnerability, his unique screen presence made people take notice. In Square Pegs, he was the eccentric, lovable Johnny Slash. But it was Star Trek that gave him something deeper, a chance to play emotion beneath silence, defiance behind softness. Off-screen, Merritt was private, almost guarded. Colleagues said he was warm, but there was always something behind the eyes, a distance, a sadness. He never publicly spoke about his personal life, but friends in the theater world knew the truth. He was gay, and living in a time when that truth came with risk, rejection, and fear. As the 1980s wore on, roles became fewer. The phone stopped ringing as often. He poured himself into theater, where he could still disappear into characters without judgment. His final role was in the play Kingfish, where he played a man dying of a mysterious illness. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. On March 17, 1989, Merritt Butchri died from complications related to AIDS. He was just 29. No press conference, no red carpet tribute, just gone. Some say he was forgotten, but that's not true. Not really. His scenes as David Marcus still linger, the way he looked at Kirk, the way he said, "I'm proud to be your son." It hits harder now, knowing how little time he had. Merritt didn't get decades to build a legacy, he only got moments. But what he gave us in those moments still echoes, raw, honest, and full of the kind of truth that lives longer than fame. Star Trek was never just a show about space, it was about people. People who dreamed, who struggled, who lit up our screens and then quietly left this world. We've looked back at the stars who once stood at the helm of the Enterprise and are now part of the stars themselves. Their faces may be gone, but their voices echo in every rerun, every quote, every fan who still believes in a better future. They boldly went where few ever do, not just across the galaxy, but deep into our hearts. If one of these legends touched your life, hit like and share your favorite memory in the comments.